So it is whiskey announcement season, and we've already talked about the 5 best new whiskeys coming soon, but there is so much more news coming, and we've got to talk about it. Stay tuned after the break, and we'll get into it. So if you haven't watched the first video, it is here. Basically, we are watching Coming Whiskey, who is trolling the TTB, although not all this information comes from Coming Whiskey. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is actually an email that was sent out by Four Roses, I believe, on today, which is Monday. So this video will be airing Tuesday. Happened Monday. Basically, there are 2 new mash bills coming out for Four Roses. So if you do not know, if you're not familiar with Four Roses, they have 10 recipes, which are basically 2 mash bills and 5 yeast strains. So 2 times 5 is 10. Makes sense. So their current mash bills are a 70% corn, 20% rye, 5% malted barley, which is pretty similar to MGP's low rye mash bill. That is the lower rye, that is their E. So they all go in O, ESV, OBSV. And then the B mash bill is 60% corn, 35% rye, 5% malted barley. So it's all very close to what MGP does. I don't know if that's intentional. I really haven't deep dived into this before. That's kind of weird that it's only really 1% off of MGP's mash bills. But that is neither here nor there. So they announced today that they are coming out with 2 new mash bills. The first one is going to be a 52% corn, 43% rye, 5% malted barley. I'm noticing a 5% malted barley across the board. I traditionally like a higher malted barley content in my whiskey. I know we talked about that in the Crafting My Ideal Bourbon. Interesting that it's such a high rye percentage, and it is all but a cheater bourbon, because it is only 52% corn. It has to be at least 51% corn. I'm not as excited for that because I'm not a big high rye person, but there are going to be people who go crazy for it. I am not one of them. However, the second mash bill that they're coming out with is an 85% corn, 10% rye, 5% malted barley. That is much more up my alley. I do have the 10 recipe set that I have to do. Hopefully, I now have, I guess, a time frame because I have to do that before the new mash bills drop. We don't know yet what exactly that's going to look like. I don't know if that's going to mean that instead of 10 recipes, they're going to have 20 recipes, or if they're going to select yeast strains to use with those, or if they're just going to be single barrels. We don't know any of that yet, but it is interesting news. Really excited to see where they go with that and what happens. The next thing, and it will be popping up on your screen right now, the new Parker's Heritage has been announced, and it is a malt. It is a 14-year Kentucky straight malt whiskey finished in reconstructed heavy toast cognac barrels. Heaven Hill, I think, has been pushing more of the American single malt stuff. I'm all for malt whiskey. The part of that I am not psyched for is the cognac barrels. Cognac is generally a no-no for me. Anything even finished in cognac. I tend to enjoy Parker's. There have been a few of them that are kind of out there. The finished ones that I have not necessarily enjoyed, specifically the Orange Curacao. It's not a barrel proof that I know of. It could be with a lower entry proof. I don't know what Heaven Hill is doing with their single malts. So it is 107 proof. It says, as the 3rd barrel finish release of the series, this edition continues to pave the way for innovation at Heaven Hill Distillery. First, our master distiller hand selects barrels of 14-year-old malt whiskey, then barrels that previously held cognac were reconstructed to include a handful of new heavy toast staves. Okay, so that explains the reconstructed part, and aged for almost 4 months, so it is a young finish, or a light finish, I should say. The result transforms the earthy, herbal character of the malt into a complex, almost port-like whiskey with notes of molasses, dark chocolate, and dried summer fruit. So it lost me at port, and then it got me back with dark chocolate and fruit. I'm not psyched for this. I don't know that I would necessarily buy one, especially at the like $185 that they have been. So I'm not sure how I feel about it, and I'm not sure I would purchase it, but it is coming, and I think it has potential to be good. I'm just not sure I have potential of buying it. Moving on to Jim Beam, I actually have 2 things coming from Jim Beam, and I feel like one of them is something that absolutely no one has asked for. 16-year-old Old Grandad is coming. So the mash bill for Old Grandad is different than the rest of the Knob Creek products. It is 63% corn, 27% rye, 10% malted barley. It's going to be 16 years old, 50% alcohol by volume, or 100 proof. It does not say bonded. I'm not sure why Old Grandad, which has always been the cheap and cheerful brand, suddenly needs a 16-year age product. I'm not sure why they are doing it as Old Grandad instead of a little book. We'll see if it's any good. I'm interested to see how it is. I'm interested to see if people like it maybe as much as the Knob Creek 15s. And I'm also interested to see how expensive it is. These ultra-aged offerings that people keep popping out with are in the absurdly expensive range. So if this is anything more than $150, I don't feel like it's going to be worth it. Moving on to the next thing from Jim Beam Distillery. They've announced that there is a new Booker's The Reserves coming out. So it seems like in addition to, I believe they're doing 4 Booker's batches a year now, they're looking to do a slightly older yearly release. If you are to believe the label, it is a Booker's, and this is a batch from 2024. Doesn't have a dash anything. It's just 2024, so that leads me to believe that it will be a once-a-year release. This one says 63.9 or 127.8, so I'm assuming what's on the label is exactly how it's going to be, and it says 8 years, 2 months, 12 days, so that is a year or two older than most Booker's batches. So it seems like this is a tier above what that is going to be. And honestly, on paper, it sounds great, right? It is a slightly older Booker's. The problem is going to be in pricing, and that's exactly, I think, where we were at with the Old Grandad. It's tough because I don't even think Booker's is worth $100, let alone what it's going for on some shelves. If this is more than $125 for Little Book, I'm out. Like, I will not be hunting this. I will not be buying this. I don't think an 8-year bourbon at cask strength. Age statements is one of the ways that I put comparisons into things, and you can get Knob Creek 9 single barrels that have more age and just as much proof almost, right? It's 7 proof points different, and some of them are even like 10, 11, 12 years. Seems like once a year they release their stocks of whiskey that's not good for anything else, and they release it as single barrels. That is $65, $70, right? I'm not paying double that for a whiskey that's younger and questionably better, right? The pricing is everything, and I think that this is going to be a price tier even above where Booker's is, and I don't think that I like Booker's enough to take the plunge on a $150 once-a-year Booker's Reserve. That's just where I'm at. Finally, the last little bit of news that we're going to go through today is back to the Buffalo Trace Distillery. So Buffalo Trace has been doing a lot of kind of ultra-aged or ultra-rare offerings recently with the Prohibition Collection, which is now finally starting to drop in places, and it seems interesting, but it's $1,000 for 2.5 bottles. It's a really tough ask. Then Daniel Weller is a new old Emmer wheat, I think 6 to 7 years old, $500, and comes with a chintzy little compass on the top. But then they recently announced that Weller Millennium is coming. So Weller Millennium is going to be a blend of 2000, 2003, 2005, and 2006 distillation season whiskeys. So it's going to be 18 to 24-year-old whiskey here at 99 proof, and the big, I think, question in everybody's mind based on how Buffalo Trace has been going with some of their ultra-aged stuff is, what is the price point? Also, I think it's very important to note, if you have not seen it, it is a blend of straight whiskeys. So one of those is not a bourbon. So I don't know if there's a rye in there. I don't know if there's a wheat whiskey. I don't know if there's an American whiskey, but it's not all bourbon. So something in there is not like the others, and it is interesting that they are doing this with the Weller brand, because I feel like almost a Mr. Sam would be a better experiment for this, because they've already been doing that. They've already been doing blends of random whiskeys with Mr. Sam's. I think Canadian is also in that, but I'm not super well versed in that. So it's interesting, and I would like to try it at some point, but I feel like it's going to be one of those like Double Eagle Very Rare or, Pappy 25. It's a real thing. If you don't believe me, look it up. Those ultra end bourbons for thousands of dollars, I think are overpriced, and I'm worried that's what this is going to be, and I'm worried that I'll never get to try it. And at that point, right, like when you're making these ultra aged shelf trophies, what's the point? I'm a little skeptical of that. So we ended up being really only one of these that I'm kind of excited for. So maybe these aren't the best new bourbons. Maybe these are the most controversial bourbons. I'm interested to see what you guys think of these. Definitely drop your comments about what you're excited for, what you're not excited for, what you've seen recently that you're excited to try in the future. We're probably going to continue this series, honestly, because the first video was pretty well received and now we've made a part 2. So we're just going to probably continue making these every once in a while as kind of our news segment. If you like this content, definitely drop us a comment. Tell us what you like, what you don't like. If you have ideas for content in the future, we'd love to hear them. We try to make all of that happen. Definitely like and comment on this video and subscribe if you haven't already. That helps us out a ton here. And we hope you'll join us in drinking like a gentleman. Cheers. Although, trucks. It's always hard to make videos at this time of day because people are wild and coming home from work. All right.